this one woman who came up and talked to me who's a historian, she's like, that means we failed as a generation. And I'm like, I don't see it as you failed, because first of all, like, I wouldn't want to think of my grandfather telling my mom these stories when she's a little girl, right?
Yeah.
Like, first and foremost, like, you don't put that on your child.
Right.
And it only came out in his twilight years was because, you know, he was older, and I think he was getting a little more I won't say sentimental, but like looking back, like maybe I should speak up a little more about this.
This is the Cinematography for Actors podcast.
More than a podcast, Cinematography for Actors is a vibrant community devoted to bridging the gap between talent and crew. Each week, our show offers transparent, insightful conversations with industry leaders. We unveil the magic behind the scenes, from candid discussions about unique filmmaking processes to in-depth technical exploration. Join us in unraveling the intricacies of filmmaking, one episode at a time. It's more than just cameras and lenses. We aim to inspire, educate, and empower as we peel back the curtain on the art of effective storytelling. Now on to the episode.
Hi, everybody. This is another episode of the Cinematography for Actors podcast. I am your host, Haley Royal, and I'm here with, who am I here with?
I'm here with, you're here with Jack Gibson,
And
your
so
co-host. I am.
That's Jack Gibson. I always love when I get to record an episode with Jack, because we both can talk forever about the stupidest tangents. So buckle up, everybody. We are bridging the gap between talent and crew. And today we have Darren Rae, right? And Jessica Olthof. They are here to talk about their film Nisei, which, if you were paying attention and listening through Holly Shorts, we had them in once before, but now they have huge news for us. What's happening, guys?
Yeah, so since Holly Shorts won, Jess got her voice back, so she'll be able to talk with that. But no, our film Nisei, the short film, we recently won the Grand Jury Prize at Cinequest Film Festival. So now we're Academy qualified, and we're starting our push, or for your consideration push, and we're just taking the momentum where it goes. So
congratulations!
Yeah, that's huge.
Oh my gosh, you guys have to do a whole FYC, don't you?
Yeah.
That's a lot.
It's a lot.
Are
but
you
we're excited?
learning things through this? Like, did you know this would have to happen and that you'd have to do this? Is it all kind of news?
I mean, I think, like, speaking from my side of it too, it's like, you always want the film to be successful first and foremost, but we kind of went into it like why we wanted to make the film, and like we'll dive into the subject of it, of course, soon. But it's very personal. It's about family, and so it's like I just want to make a good film in that aspect of it, and so everything else we said, like, if we get into one festival, we get into 10, that's just kind of like icing on the cake. And then it just kept going and going, and we won this, and we really didn't expect this or have a plan for this. So it is kind of jumping into new territory and learning as we go, but it's been really fun.
Yeah, I do want to talk about this. Like, let's do it now so I don't forget. Before we even get into what the film is, because we will do that. What is now what? Like, what is your process? Do you have to find a publicist? Do you have to do like campaign stuff? Like, what did you do? Like, was there a morning you woke up and you were like, oh, we won, now there's all of this?
Yeah, I think when we found out we won, we just kind of did research and found who had previously won, and then saw what they did. So then we were like, okay.
A little stalking.
Did you talk to anybody? Were you kind of like,
we did? Yeah, we did. We've met a few people who won the short documentary award, and a few years ago, the what was it? I forget the film name.
We spoke to producers who have won in the past, and kind of like what were the steps you took? Because like for a short, I think you kind of expect, shorts are kind of the stepping stone into larger format potentially, and we didn't realize like how much like backing there was in terms of support, like obviously financial side of it too. But so it's like we had no connections at all. So it was really Jess and I both came from the crew world. Like, so like Jess was a coordinator for years, I was a dolly grip for years, and so it was really just like texting old producers that I worked with like 5 years ago. I was like, hey, do you have any experience with this? And thankfully they put us in the right direction. So
yeah, you can text those people and be like, hey, so surprise, I do this and I also won this and now I can do this. That must be a really exciting text for them to get, to be like, yeah, someone I know from the past who was a dolly grip is like an Oscar qualified short film now.
Yeah,
that's pretty cool.
Yeah,
what a cool feeling.
we found an amazing partner with Alta Global Media with
Oh,
Theo
great.
Dumont.
Yeah.
He actually, you know, runs Holly Short
Yeah.
as
Great,
well
yeah.
too. And so we actually reached out to them asking for advice, like not
Yeah.
even like considering that this, you know, we didn't know anything about it. They're like, oh, you know, we can actually help with this too. And so we took calls with them, and it was kind of a perfect match. And so
Oh,
now
great.
we're starting
Yeah.
the journey. So
I
Theo's great.
love to hear that they're not just like, you won, get out of here, good luck.
Yeah.
Like people will kind of like handhold you a little bit through the process just to like help you make sure you're making the right steps.
Mhm.
That is so cool. Do you
Mhm.
feel any like are there any moments where the like nerves of over like how big this could be, do you feel like you're letting that slow you down in any way, or are you just busting through them?
I feel like, I mean, it's a nerve-wracking, like how many people I think we need to reach out to and like
Mhm.
all of that. It's like, okay, we just need to keep the momentum going. So that's a little bit nerve-wracking. It's like, okay, not having done it before, we don't really know the scope of like what we need to do exactly.
Right.
So I think that's where it's nerve-wracking, but everything else is mostly exciting because like even just getting the opportunity to do this in general is cool, whether we make the short list or even the
Yeah.
nomination, you know, just doing this in general is
Yeah.
fun. So
This might be a very delicate question, but financially, is FYC very expensive for you guys? What are you doing? How are you paying for this?
yeah,
a lot of top ramen for the next
Okay.
couple months.
But you can't not do it.
Yeah.
You gotta
Yeah.
just kind of be like, well, there it goes.
And we've talked about that too, because like we, you know, we're even Theo, when we originally brought the project to him and saying like, what would it look like? And he said, you know, you got to present it as you're the little film that could, right? We don't have
Yeah.
backing of like a major studio or outside funding. Like we funded the film ourselves as
Yeah.
well too. And so just being able to keep that going. And also it's like, if not now, when? It's not like
Totally.
I would want to
Yeah.
wait for a different project and like,
Right.
you know, betting on like, oh, I'm going to win another Academy
Yeah.
Qualifying Festival and then do it. So it's like, if we're going to do it, we might as well do it now. And at the end of the day, this is what we both came down to LA for, is to be creatives and to get our projects out here. So, you know,
we're also doing so much ourselves. Like I'm making the press kit, I'm making all the visuals pretty much. So like we are doing a lot of the work, I think, because we can't necessarily afford like this huge, like, I don't know, PR push where they like make all of the materials for you. Like I'm doing a lot of it.
Right.
So
Well, it also kind of, I feel like, really lines up. I know a few people who endeavor, you know, to get into the waters of short films who don't have the mentality of like, I will make this happen.
yeah.
Like we'll find a way.
right. And I think it's been a good balance with like Theo and the team. Like every week we have our meetings talking about like what needs to be accomplished. And we're very good at dividing and conquering and being very upfront and honest of what needs to happen too. And so, like I said, we're not the biggest budget, you know, PR campaign for your consideration, but I think, you know, we all have skills that we're bringing to it. So
Yeah.
So we just got some great advice from someone who was previously nominated. You have to record that when they announce the nominations, just in case. So you have it and you have your celebration
Oh yeah.
or not. I mean,
Yeah.
you can always delete, but definitely record that moment because
Okay.
it would be a bummer
We will.
not to have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We will.
Listen, we've heard all of this process so far about
Uh-huh.
a film that some of our listeners who weren't there for Holly Shorts have no idea what it is.
Let's
Could Darren, could you give us the log line?
yeah. So Nisei is a World War II period piece. It's inspired by stories from my grandfather, and it follows the story of two Japanese American brothers who are put in the internment camps. And from the internment camps, they still volunteer for the 442nd, which was an all Japanese American unit in the United States military and one of the most medaled units in the history of the military. So
Yeah, I mean, like, can we talk about that for a minute? The 442nd is such an amazing thing. These people were ripped from their homes, shoved into camps, just like, I don't know, just like, what's the word? Ostracized and treated terribly. And they still decided to go fight for a country that was actively harming them and their families. And then they became the most medaled infantry. Like that's an incredible thing, just like in and of itself. Yeah. And I'm sure that you had a lot to say about that.
Yeah, I mean, I've grown up with the stories my whole life, like obviously getting to know my grandfather. He passed away about 10 years ago now, but you know, I just assumed it was common knowledge, and
Right.
I don't want to say I took it for granted, but because I will say I did my due diligence. Anytime I can do a book report, or anytime I can do a video essay for school, which usually got me out of doing an essay. So that's why I did the filming side of it, and I knew it was a unique story, so I would do that. But I think like as I got older, and you know, you always look back and wish you asked more and did more research, I really started to dive into kind of the whole unit and not just my family side of it. And even when we went into production with this film, like aside from the internment camp, the Japanese American side of it, but just World War II in general, there's a reason why they call it the greatest generation. It's because it's some of the most selfless people, the most selfless acts, the most like heroic, bravest stories you'll ever hear. Like not even just the military, but like, you know, the men and women that went into the camps too, and like what they had to go through. And when we're actually making the film, we had you know, we're in our 30s now. We had a lot of younger crew and filmmakers that were a part of the process. And we're just like, how many of you know about, not even about the 442nd, like how many know about this battle in World War II? How many know Saving Private Ryan? How many of you seen Band of Brothers? And it'd be like one hand or two hands.
Yeah.
And from a filmmaker standpoint, I'm like, okay, first of all, you guys need to see that. But it really made me realize like our generation is kind of the last generation that had any direct connection to those stories. And Jess is, you can speak to like the Dutch side of it too.
Yeah, I mean, even my family is connected in some way. My grandparents both lived in the Netherlands during that time. So like they were removed from their homes for safety, you know, during all of that. So I have stories. And we asked the students at San Jose State that was helping us with the film, like if they had any connections too, because like somewhere everybody kind of has some sort of like connection to the story in a way.
And that was kind of part of the fun of it too, is because a lot of them just didn't know. And so part of the process of even making the film was they actually went back to their families and asked about this and started doing research and learning things that they never knew before. So
I mean, there are people who grew up in houses on property that was taken from a Japanese family and then given to a judge or some other quote unquote American that they have no idea that the history of that house that they grew up in.
Yeah, so my family, we were sharecroppers. So it's like every season they would put them on a different plot, just so that way they can keep enriching the soil with different, like you rotate from like beans to strawberries to corn, whatever it was. And so my family was strawberry farmers. And because my great grandfather was a first generation immigrant, he wasn't allowed to own the land. And so he was basically just leasing it from the local farm. I'm not going to name the name of the farm, but it's a prevalent packaging if you go by certain areas.
Still to it.
But when they got back from the war, and like the owner of the property was just like, don't worry, your stuff is safe, we're going to hold on to it. And then they got back and it's like the house was just filled with someone else's family, and they're just like, oh, sorry,
too bad,
took too long,
you were gone. You were
Yeah.
just inexplicably missing from your home. That's just crazy making.
So what, I mean, you mentioned that it's something that you had addressed before throughout your life, but what brings about the short story? Is it just kind of that you've been biding your time to tell the story, or the stars aligned? Like why is now the time to tell the story?
I think it's a little bit of multiple things. Like I always knew that when I got into film, and I always knew I wanted to be a filmmaker, that this would be something I would want to tell eventually. And I think a lot of it is, you know, just when I was younger, lack of confidence, feeling I wasn't capable. And obviously when you're doing stuff, even if it's not entirely true, if it's fiction based off someone, like there's still that kind of like gut feeling of like, I don't want to mess this up. I want to make sure it's right. And you kind of have to shed that and be confident in your ability as a storyteller. And also it's like, what's the greater message of the film? And, you know, like I always say that this film is about the Japanese community, Japanese American community, and my family's the vessel for that. It's kind of the representation of multiple facets of storylines that have happened in the camps and in the military. And so like when I was younger, I was, like I said, I always knew I wanted to do it, but maybe I didn't feel like I was quite capable to do it. And kind of a big thing for me was actually during COVID for us. We went into lockdown, and you know, we've been down here 10 years now.
Oh my gosh, congratulations.
But
you stayed, you made it. What?
Exactly. And so like, but we've been in the crew side of it too. And so it's like, I came down to be a director and a filmmaker, and not saying I didn't appreciate, you know, learning all this stuff and being on sets and learning how to light and do camera stuff like that. I think it actually makes us better filmmakers because we know the crew side of it. But like we're there during COVID, there's no work, even if you wanted to, and you're just kind of like, well, what's next? Like, what am I going to do? And so like, I literally rode my bike to the park and just sat there every day for like 3 months and just wrote. So,
oh my God, at the park.
Yeah.
Riding in the park. That's pretty amazing. I also would like to examine the idea that you felt like maybe you weren't quite ready. You wanted to tell this story, you weren't ready. But I would argue that, as you said, you would tell stories about this to do like a video essay instead of an essay. This was any assignment you were doing. This was kind of a thing that you were workshopping your entire life of like how to do it the way you wanted to do it. I don't know where I'm going with this, but like, I just want to be like, you were ready when the time was right.
I think a lot of it too is like when I wrote the script and I showed it to her and said I wanted to make it, I think it was a lot of don't think, just do kind of attitude, because it's like you have so many like
From Jessica?
Or from both of us too, because I have so many books and so many historical things where it's like, I'm like, okay, I'm going to go back and explore this. And it's like, well, I have to read, these 20 books to make sure it's 100% historically accurate. And then you just kind of get lost in the, the education side of it, the information side of it. And you kind of lose the focus of like making a good story that'll engage people.
Right.
And so it's like just kind of shedding all those inhibitions and just like not worrying about what people are going to think. What's the film we want to make?
Right.
And that's kind of how we got there.
Well, there's also something so interesting about the dynamic of, coming on as a producer.
Yeah.
There are a lot of crisscrossing lines here because, obviously, I mean, like you said, with your family having come from the Netherlands, like you have your own route to this story. But then, there is a separation on just kind of like a surface level of not being a Japanese American.
Yeah.
But then you are also a couple. So like this story, it becomes reconnected as being a part of your family in a different way. So I guess I'm just curious to hear what that process was like from you, having so many different kind of threads connected to this story while you're making it.
Yeah, I mean, before we even decided we were going to make this, at the dinner table, like his grandma would sometimes talk about stories and everything. And like, this was years and years ago. So, or like his mom, I mean, it wasn't much because, I mean, you can talk about this, like they didn't talk about it much at all. Right. But just hearing his side of things and like the research he's done then made me want to do research and like look into it. And we went to like the museums everywhere. We drove to Manzanar, all of that. Just like, it was just really, like as sad as it is, it was interesting to like go deep into the history of it and like with him and like put that on paper and like see what it looks like. And as far as timing goes, I mean, I was working in production, doing like movie back to back. So it's like, we never really had a moment where we were like, okay, now let's do this until COVID really. And then we're like, okay, actually, maybe we really should do this now.
Yeah,
I mean,
because
financially,
you both have these huge resumes of like very impressive work. So like COVID was a little bit like, fuck COVID, but like COVID was like a little bit of a blessing that you guys were both available at the same time to finally do something. Let's talk about a little bit of the support that you received as well, because as you said, you went to museums and the Japanese American Museum of San Jose. Yeah. What sort of support did you receive from them?
Yeah, I mean, they helped us out. I mean, with so many things, but first off, that location we filmed there. So the barrack scene in the movie, they actually have a recreated barrack in the museum itself. Yeah.
And they let you shoot in it.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
that's
talking about like on the producing side for costs and everything, like all of that support was just so helpful for us to even be able to make the movie, really.
The barrack was built like, because we were like toying with the idea of like, how do we like try to build this like as a set, and like, it's like a lot of wood and like it's just crazy expensive. And the barrack in there is actually built to the memory of the one of the people that founded the museum. He was a little boy at Tulu Lake, and so part of the museum is he actually built it to his memory and kind of populated it with the the knickknacks and stuff like that. So they were just like tremendously supportive, just allowing us to even film in there, and like bringing a camera into like this like historical thing. You don't want to scratch the floor, you don't want to do it, and like just like extra paranoid about
lots
that
of tennis balls in the budget.
Yeah, that was a big part.
Layout.
But another huge supporter of the project is San Jose State University, which was our alma mater. We both graduated from there. Yeah, that's where we actually met.
So nice.
Yeah, her first.
What's the Fighting what? I went on a walk there.
Spartan.
Spartan.
Yeah.
Okay. I went on a walk there a couple weeks ago. I friends who live there. We went on a walk. It was
Oh
nice.
yeah.
Go Spartans.
Yes.
Sorry.
So-
Okay, we are stoked to shout out our audio sponsor, Deity Microphones. Their S-Mic 2 Pro shotgun mics have impeccable sound clarity, directionality, headphone monitoring, and a user-friendly design. And we're proud to launch our studio with them. Our goal is to bring you educational gems every episode, and with these mics, you can listen to the best quality audio possible wherever you are. To learn more about using Deity mics for your own podcasting, voiceover, or filming needs, go to deitymic.com.
Yeah, so you met there.
Yeah, you're actually my first AC job.
Yeah, on
There.
his film.
No. We did a football intro for the school,
Oh.
and I was the first assistant camera on it, and she was the second
Yeah.
assistant camera on it.
Yeah.
And that's what we met.
That's how you met.
We
Yeah.
didn't date till way later.
Yeah.
Okay, but
That's how we met though.
go Spartans.
Yes.
Right.
And every summer, so San Jose State, every summer they do a summer film class
Mm.
where it used to be making features, but then that didn't really work out. I
Yes.
think.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
And it's
a
an
lot.
undergrad program too. I think it was
Mhm.
the only undergrad program in the state or the country that actually did full length features, like completely student
Yeah.
ran. So
That's
it was.
sounds like a
Yeah.
train wreck.
When you look back,
Waiting
when
to
you look back
happen.
on, it, you're like, how did we get through
Right.
those? Like, 'cause like student producers, and then you have like, faculty support and stuff like that too. But they, amazing, like helping us get out in the industry too. But like, one of our producers, Nick Martinez, who's also our business partner, he
Mhm.
still teaches there. And when we were thinking about doing the project, he came to us and said, hey, what do you think about doing this, like coming back and teaching this, through the school too, as part of the summer project? And kind of what happened was we talk about like COVID, allowing us the freedom to explore creatively what we wanted to do.
Mhm.
We also talked to him about it and the idea that there was this sort of, I want to say, gap in education because of COVID, not just San
Yeah.
Jose State, but everywhere. And when you think about that, it's like, because everything was virtual, especially like in a medium like film where it needs to be hands-on learning.
Mhm.
So it's like when we were students, when we were freshmen, juniors were the ones teaching us how to like open up a C-stand, how to like turn on a light, how to build a
Mhm.
camera. And the problem is now it's like everything's virtual. So now you have juniors that have the same hands-on experience as freshmen.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And so you don't have
There's
those
none of
upper
that
classes,
really
peer-to-peer
interesting.
thing.
like really teaching them. And so we thought about it, and it's like, obviously we get a lot of resources from it. And we said, okay, we want to do it, but we want to do it in a way that, we feel comfortable, like we're giving back as much as we can too.
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
And so part of the thing we did was like, we were up there for 5 months, I think.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
it was like 3 months and then we started.
but like
filming.
total was like
Yeah.
5 months. And part of it was like during the summer class, it was twice a week. We would call in all of our industry professionals that we knew, and either would fly out and do a
Mhm.
lecture, or they would come on Zoom and give a lecture. So we had stuntmen giving lectures, we had sound designers,
Whoa.
DPs.
Yep.
And so it's like the
Special
students got,
effects.
special effects came on, like a union special effects guy came and taught them stuff. And
That's
so it's
incredible.
like an undergrad student got to learn all like the different avenues that you could take as a
Mhm.
filmmaker. And I
Yeah.
think a lot of film schools, especially like theory-based film schools, you don't really learn that there's other things besides just make movies.
Yeah.
And so we really wanted to let people know it's like, hey, you can have a career, you can be successful in this medium. And these are like all the different things you can explore.
This is all
Yeah.
throughout production that you did
Mhm.
this.
Yeah.
too.
So, and then I also taught, coming up through production as a production coordinator, I taught a group of students like how to run a production office.
Mm.
And we couldn't afford to hire like an actual team to like do
Yeah.
the production office. So I taught them all how to do it. And then on the,
They
during
did
the
it.
shoot, they all helped me out and did it. Yeah.
Wow.
Oh, this is
Yeah.
not only like a brilliant idea that
Yeah.
pays off, on the production side, the business side, but
Mhm.
this is also a really great gift that you gave
Yeah.
to these students who got to have actual
Mm.
practical experience.
Yeah.
And now they're like, I worked on that Oscar qualifying short film. That is amazing.
A few of them graduated, and they're down here now,
Yeah.
starting out in the industry. So it's proven it worked. Because when we graduated,
Cool.
it was like 3 of us that moved
Yeah.
down here.
Yeah.
So I like to
And
think
now
that.
they have this on their resume.
Yeah.
They're like, I did this.
And they started making their own films and like they were making proper sides, call sheets, like
They
organized.
knew-
They
You're
knew
more
how
worried
to-
about the email etiquette was right.
The sides are the correct
Yes.
shape and size.
Yep.
This is amazing.
Wow.
Yeah. So let's talk about we mentioned a little bit that you are a couple, and that's that brings it into your family, specifically Jessica was already in your family. But what is that like being together, living together, working together? This is film is not an 8-hour-a-day job. It's
No.
not like you're like,
Yeah.
yeah, we ride into the office together. No. This is all encompassing. Like,
Mhm.
did you get sick of each other At any moment.
I
Was
I was
there-
actually just talking about this the other day.
There's like maybe like, what?
What were you talking? I'm curious what she's gonna say now.
But it's kind of like we found it sometimes hard to like keep the momentum going with work, because it's like, oh, let's just, instead of doing something, it's like, oh, let's just like watch TV or
Yeah.
whatever.
We just make spaghetti.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We're both good at
but-
making each other lazy.
Yeah.
Like, oh, let's just sit down.
But recently we decided to like, especially because we live in an apartment in LA, it's like we don't have a separate space to go to.
Mhm.
So we found going to like a coffee shop nearby in the morning, at least for like a few hours, and just doing work there helped so much,
Mm.
because then it's
Yeah.
like, okay, this is actually work time. Like
Right.
we're not doing anything else. We're not like, yeah, I don't know, cleaning the house or like just like,
Forces you that it feels like people are watching you, so you can't
Yeah.
it's like, all right, awkward, just send as many emails as
Yeah.
we can until we can get back.
Well,
yeah.
and then you become a regular at a coffee shop. They're like, what are you guys working on?
I know.
You don't want them watching you goof off over it.
Yeah, exactly.
You're like, we're making a film.
Like starting to type YouTube in my search bar, and then I have to like close it, 'cause,
They're like, I
someone's
see
watching
you
behind me.
shopping over there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You also you brought up for a little bit earlier something that is very common among survivors of like large events like this, similar with the Holocaust, of there being a sort of silence for a lot of survivors, especially within the family, and especially in this case, it doesn't just stop there. There's, I mean, historically, it's a pretty unknown period of the U.S. in my experience of having lived on both sides of the country. And I mean, the only representation I can think of it in popular media, aside from a few other like films that are specifically about the experiences of people who were interned, is like the background story of Mr. Miyagi
Right.
is set for the 442nd.
He actually was in the 442nd, the actor in real
Yeah,
life
Pat
was,
Morita. Yeah.
Whoa.
Was because he was also in Tula Lake, I think.
Mhm.
Yeah. And so yeah, so I guess what I'm bringing this all up to is the importance of keeping these stories alive, especially now, like you said, as being a generation who had the last contact with this kind of thing. What to you was so important about being able to tell this story outside of, you know, the kind of filmmaking context?
I mean, I think like kind of what we talked about before, it's just I never realized how small of an audience it was to begin with. And so I'm Yonsei, which is fourth generation, and my mom's Sansei, which is their yeah, make sure I didn't flip that. And we actually played it for the Nisei Veterans Association like a couple weeks ago, and there's a couple soldiers there, veterans, that got to see it, and talked to some people, and they came up and talked to me, and they're like, majority of the people that are still active members within the community and stuff like that, they are Sansei, and they're like, how do we engage more Yonsei members? How do we engage more younger generations and keep these stories alive? And they said, and like this one woman who came up and talked to me, who's a historian, she's like, that means we failed as a generation. And I'm like, I don't see it as you failed, because first of all, like, I wouldn't want to think of my grandfather telling my mom these stories when she's a little girl, right?
Yeah.
Like, first and foremost, like, you don't put that on your child.
Right.
And it only came out in his twilight years was because, you know, he was older, and I think he was getting a little more I want to say sentimental, but like looking back, like maybe I should speak up a little more about this. I think the Japanese American community in general too is like we are very reserved, and we keep a lot in, and I know myself suffering from that, you know, as well, just like being outwardly expressing myself and trying to let people actually know how I feel and think all the time. We can talk about this in a relationship perspective too, how I don't show any emotion. But yeah, like the older I get and the more like, you know, like more of the veterans pass away, like the more of like the community, like it starts to shift. I'm realizing how important it is to keep these legacies alive. And like you said, like the stories about the internment and imprisonment, you don't know what's necessarily comparable to that, like a direct one-to-one, but you know, it doesn't matter if it's Japanese American or whatever race, minority, anyone who's being, you know, subjugated to these things. It's like, you need to know these lessons so history won't repeat itself, you know, whether it's 50 years from now, 100 years from now. If people look back and say, oh, this already happened once, that is not, let's not do that again. Yeah, please. And I think especially like with modern media and that, you know, just an influx of so much information at once, like you kind of lose track of like things happening. And so kind of having these kind of core values and staples to like go back on and know the history of things, I think that helps you, you know, as a community, as a generation, makes smarter decisions. So
Yeah.
Yeah. With the project itself, your goal originally was you needed to tell this story that you've been carrying for a long time. Has your goal changed at all at this point, now that you are moving into a space of possible, you know, press, possible notoriety, possible nomination, or is it the same? Is it just that it's more people will see, more people will hear this story?
I mean, I think, like, you know, I would love to do like a feature of this, or like a
Mhm.
Band of Brothers miniseries on that. Like
Yeah.
that would be the next stepping stone of this, and to just broaden the audience and broaden the horizon of it. I think for me, like I'm a big kind of genre filmmaker, like a fan of that stuff. And so like doing something like this didn't really like necessarily like wouldn't like fit into like the
Right.
things I would necessarily want to do, but obviously it's a personal family story. I think for me, the outreach and kind of really learning about the community of it has really kind of shifted my perspective of what I want to continue with it to now. Like even just casting, like our two leads, Jonathan, who plays my grandfather, he's Nisei, he's second generation. Brent Yoshida, who plays his brother John, he his family was actually at Manzanar, and so he had family in the camps too. And so like I just knew the anecdotes of my family.
Yeah.
And so being able to actually learn that there's a community that's been impacted by this, and none of us have ever like talked about this, you know, whether that's going back to like the Japanese American culture of just like not, you know, wanting to share kind of bad situations. But I think now we've started to open this dialogue, and, you know, like feel like I'm much more active now, like going to the veterans reunion this year. And like, I want my mom to go next year. I want to like interact more with like the Japanese American National Museum, the Go for Broke Museum. And I've started my outreach there as well too. And so realizing that there is that gap within the community itself, to try to fill that and support any way I can, but also just getting these stories bigger and bigger, you know, nationally,
I
hopefully.
feel like we also realized too, like after every screening we do, so many people come up and they're like, wow, like either I didn't know, or like that was an amazing way to tell the story. So like,
Right.
yeah, I mean, as a filmmaker, of course, like I want to make more films about this and other things too. But yeah, I think that's the reason why we do it. It's like people come after the film and they're like, oh wow,
Right.
like, this is, and then just hearing people react too when you're like sitting in the audience watching it.
And I think all good films, whether it's historical or not, it's, you know, you have these universal themes applied to it. And someone who's not Japanese American or didn't experience this, you can still take away, you know, messages from it and feel good about it, feels, you know, cry about it, like, you know, good. But so it's been really exciting, like you said, like every place we've played and the reception of it. Like we played at Indie Shorts in Indianapolis, and so it's like you're talking about Midwest, and people are like, we had no idea this was a thing at all, and they still enjoyed it. And now they're going to go do research. They're going to go on Google and, you know, look up, you know, articles and stuff like that. So.
I know personally, you've been saying camp names, and I'm realizing that I don't know any of the names. That's not, it hasn't been a part of, you know, like general American education. But I think that's a really important thing to know. You know the names. You mentioned the Holocaust. It's hard not to draw those parallels. You know the names of those camps, and I think that comes, you know, with education. And so yes, I mean, it's expansive in that way, where even like I'm sitting here interviewing you, and as soon as you leave, I'm gonna be like, what were the camp names? And I gotta know what those are.
We have some exciting news. CFA has teamed up with We Make Movies to get you a discount on production management services, including access to comprehensive production insurance and workers' comp for your next shoot. Visit wemakemovies.org/insurance and use code CFA23 on your intake form for 10% off your quote.
Is your grandfather living?
No, he passed away about 10 years ago, like freshman year of college for me.
So you weren't able to really have conversations with him before, you know, really diving in and telling this story with this in mind.
Right.
But what sort of conversations were you? You said that he was a little more open near the end of his life. What sort of things was he willing to share? Because, you know, it is personal trauma, and a lot of the time you don't want to do that. What sort of things do you feel like you learned directly from him, and what sort of things do you feel like you had to go dig for?
So he he would say stuff, but it's like you're still telling a child, so you're not
Right.
gonna be like, oh, like I saw this person die or
Uh-huh.
stuff like that. And so you know, there'd be moments like my dad would still bring up, like we're walking in the redwood forest in Northern California, and he goes, oh, this feels a lot like France, or this feels like that one hill and stuff like that. And you start to like piece things together.
Uh-huh.
And the National Museum did a great job of actually interviewing him before he passed away, and they did a really good job of trying to interview as many veterans as
wonderful.
possible.
Wow.
And so even in that interview, he would say like, oh yeah, I remember it was nighttime and we're going up this, you know, this slick hill, and it was like marble and people were falling and getting hurt, and like he never said what the hill was, he didn't know.
Yeah.
And then meanwhile, while like I'm listening to his interviews and cataloging, and I have these books of like the 442nd troop movement, and I'm starting to like piece it together. I'm like, oh, like that's the time period that would happen and stuff like that. And so it's kind of piecing together all those things. And when I was a kid too, I would go to a couple reunion tours and events, and like I was a kid, so I didn't go up and talk to the veterans and stuff like that, but I would like hear stories. Like one of the stories I heard was about the Nisei soldiers were in a cottage, and then there was a French family or Italian family in there, and they fed them, they gave them food, water, and just let them house there for a little bit and stayed the night, and then they left, and then in the morning the house got blown up because the Germans thought they were still in there.
Oh my God.
And so it's like those little things where it's not necessarily like I can specifically say when and where in the war it was, but like understanding the importance and the impact of those kind of little stories. And so that's kind of how I approached writing this, because like I said, like this is inspired and taking themes and little stories here and there from my grandfather, but at the end of the day, it's a film. It needs to have certain overlying themes, and it needs to, you know, I mean, being a budget film too, it's like the location where we're shooting kind of dictated how we shoot the battle scene and stuff like that too. And so it's just really just trying to take that information, kind of like I said before, it's like take all the information and just don't think, just do it and just see how it comes out. So
Jessica, was there anything that surprised you through this process, the entire thing, about the stories you heard, about Darren in particular as a person? Like, were you, what surprised you?
I mean, I think it was actually surprised, like we pulled it off. I mean, I know that I thought we could, but no, like in the way that we did, like I knew
you're still pulling it off in a surprising way.
Like I had faith that we can do it, but I didn't, you know, just with their budget limitations and everything, I was like, I don't know how we're gonna find a bus. I don't know how we're gonna find these locations, like the costumes, all of these things, and do it within a budget that we can afford. So that was like
talk
kind of
about the
surprising.
bus at Holly Shorts.
Yes,
but the
remind us.
Can you? Well, I'll let you do the jump.
The bus was our executive producer
originally told us we're probably gonna have to change the scene.
Yeah,
I just wrote it as it was, and they're like, "Oh, we're not going to find a 40 bus."
Like something to like that looks realistic enough where it's not like you're like trying to, I don't know, shoot in a modern bus.
A 90s bus for a 40s
like
bus.
We wanted to make it look authentic as much as possible. So there's a bus museum in Fremont, fairly close to San Jose State, that just has buses from, I don't know, buses and cars, like and like
30s all the way to modern buses.
And they're open, like I think they're open twice a month or something, but they rent them out for films, but they don't, you know, there's not that much filmmaking in the Bay Area except for films that come in.
But we didn't even find that. Like our executive producer from San Jose State, Barnaby Dallas, he was like sitting in his office, and someone from the city came in because they do this like historical once a year kind of thing in downtown, and they're like, hey, you know, we're looking to do historical things, you know, this year's like kind of Japanese American focused. And then he's like, you do know what we're making this year, right? And then he told him, he goes, oh yeah, there's a bus museum up in Fremont. And so we call him up, and they're like, yeah, show up. And it happened to be like that one day of the month or twice a month that was open. So we went out there, and they just happened to have finished fixing that bus. It's been out of commission for like 3 years. And because they don't make the parts anymore, someone like it's a bunch of retired bus drivers, like school bus drivers, and one of them like machined a part from scratch and they just installed it. And so I actually have video of us in the first first bus ride in like 3 years. And then like the president of the museum was like, come on, hop in and go for a ride. And they're like, Tom, like the brakes are brand new, careful. And he hits the brakes, and I'm filming, and we go like flying to the front of the bus, and he goes, oh, the brakes are a lot better than they were a while ago.
The other cool thing about that place is that they had an old bus come in that was just used because at the time they were still, I think, finishing up Oppenheimer, and they filmed up there in Berkeley for some of it. And so we
rented a bus from the same place.
Oh, I just love stories like this when it feels like everything around you, like the universe, wants it to happen.
Like it almost feels like sometimes things are brought to you instead of you going out and grinding. Also, something I'm hearing through this interview is that we should all be reaching out to museums more.
Mhm.
That's how we're
actually.
gonna find things to shoot with. We're all like, where do we get the stuff? Prop houses. No, guys, it's in museums.
I know.
You got to be careful with it, but it's
Museums
in museums.
and national parks. We actually filmed out in Manzanar Historical Center. That's the exterior of the internal.
Mhm.
So we called it Tule Lake, but Tule Lake was a little too far, and they don't have a lot of buildings left. But
Right.
National parks now, if you apply for a permit and you get it, it's free to shoot on national parks.
Currently, I don't know.
Currently,
You
they might
heard
have
it
changed it.
here first.
Or at least it was-
everybody.
maybe that's
Whoa.
You
maybe-
can shoot in a national park for free with a permit.
Yeah.
That's huge
They,
news.
they have to approve it though.
Well,
Like, if you're gonna be like,
right.
oh, I'm gonna set a fire in
actually a
Joshua,
website
you're either gonna say no, but
I don't think so.
Yeah.
You're like, we have a shot of the entire desert catching on fire. We want to do it here.
Yeah. We also had a really small crew when we went out to Manzanar. It was just like
Mhm.
8 of us.
I think,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Be
that is
respectful.
that is pretty small.
Yeah.
So you said it was 5 months, 3 months was that purely pre-production, or were you doing more kind of the like educational stuff?
Yeah, it was kind of a slow roll into pre-production. It was mostly educational. So it was like twice a week talking with the students and then meeting with them, kind of getting everybody on board with the film. And then we went into like heavy pre-production, which was about a month. And I would say it's a little bit longer than maybe, I mean, you would do for a budget this size, but because we were also teaching students,
Mhm.
all our department heads we hired. So it was all the students that helped each
Industry
department. They got to
professionals.
go and like pick where they wanted to be, like
You're like mentor.
yeah,
Yeah.
basically. But so that was about a month, and then we filmed for 7 days. Yes.
7 days principal, and then Manzanar was the 8th day, which we had to do like 3 months down the line.
Yeah.
This
Right.
is just excellent because it allowed you to like kind of stretch out
Yeah.
the process a little bit. Do you feel like that pace that you were allowed
Mhm.
by shooting through San Jose State was helpful,
Oh yeah.
like, and good for the story even?
I mean, safety wise for sure, because we are dealing with weapons and just
Mhm.
stunts and everything out in the war scene. So we were able to do that very slow. But I mean,
Yeah,
shooting everything else too.
I think, like if we were really like, not that we would do this, but if you had to cram it and go off a page count or however you typically like schedule it, it's like the battle scene was 3 days that it took us to film. Like
Yeah.
you could probably do that in a day and a half, 2 days, like if you really crammed everything. But like obviously like the student aspect of it, but also just like the safety aspect of this, because this was coming right off of like Rust, and it was like a couple months after that too. And so it's like firearm safety is extremely important. I've been on the opposite end of that too as a dolly grip. So it's like I'm running in doing handheld stuff and like coming around a corner. Like I've been on shows where it's like they shoot blanks right at you, and then they're like, oh, we didn't know that was going to happen.
Yeah.
And so like we were extra paranoid about that stuff. And so like even as far as like the armor, we brought the armor out, a full day early, did a full weapon seminar, let the actors work with the weapons, learn how to use them. It was all blank firing. And then anytime they weren't actually firing blanks, we gave them a replica. So they're not just running around with a loaded gun or anything like that. Every single shot of you, and when you watch them, if you notice every single shot with a loaded weapon where they're shooting blanks, it's always pointed downrange. It's always that specific thing. And the camera's in a very specific location. And so by us shooting like a page a day, 2 pages a day, we can like, if it takes 2 hours to set this thing up and do it safely, it's going to take 2 hours. And we kind of,
I mean, not only from a safety aspect is that wonderful, but especially with young people who are coming up in the industry or aren't even quite there because they're still in school.
Right.
Being afforded that opportunity to just like move slowly on set, regardless of an armor and safety, is like a really special gift to be able to slowly learn things. And like, that's one of the things that we really prioritize at CFA, and like fostering that idea as opposed to, a director on the kind of high horse in Video Village and like the shit rolls downhill. Is I mean, obviously time is not always a liberty you have, but the ethos behind that. So I think that's really cool that you guys did that around a film that in itself is already educational and giving back, but went the extra step, which is
to
really
build this
wild.
foundation for these kids of like, take your time, make it safe,
it's okay.
Yeah.
We talked about that too. Like if this film was still like the way it is now, like in terms of like how it looks and how it came together, but everyone had a bad time on set, it's like I wouldn't want to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like filming, it's like, especially, if you want to go into a career of filming, you're giving so much of your life doing it. You're doing 10-12 hour days, and so it's like you build your community around your work, which I think is very unique to filmmaking. And so like I've been in the TV world and other stuff like that, where it's like you have, like you said, it rolls downhill, and when you're on a bad set, it affects everything. It affects you, it affects your mental health, and it affects outside of work, because you don't have time outside of work, let's be honest. But I think it's important to remember, like when I first got here, I'm not very outspoken, I'm not very loud, and you always, you hear the loud people that are screaming and yelling, and I think when you're young and you're starting out, you think, oh, I have to be that way to be successful, because that's what you're shown at the start. And so like we really want to set an example, saying like, hey, like you can be yourself and you can go at your own pace, and there's a place for you in this industry. So
Yeah.
That is such a beautiful.
Beautiful.
Let's wrap it up.
Very well said.
There's
Yeah.
a place for
There's-
you
yeah.
in this industry. Thank you so much for being with us today,
Thank you.
you guys. Congratulations. Fingers
Massive.
crossed.
Yeah.
Nisei, for your consideration.
Yeah. Seriously,
Yeah.
go. I mean, it's a topic you should know about. Do your research, and there's truly no better way to start than watching Nisei.
Yeah.
And you're also helping the Oscars process along the way. So
Also, Google the camp names, find out, learn some stuff about this
yes,
bad, horrible, terrible event. It was not a high point for American history. Thank you guys. And fingers crossed, can't wait to see what happens.
Thank you, and keep track of the film. We're doing this, but we're about halfway through our festival push too, so there'll be online screeners for people to watch. And for your consideration, we're going to do a couple events around Veterans Day weekend as well too. So
keep your eyes open for some FYC screenings. Bye guys.
Awesome.
Thanks for listening.
Join us in bridging the gap between talent and crew. Start by subscribing on your preferred podcast platform, sign up for our newsletter to stay up to date on vendor discounts, community events, and new podcast releases, and educate yourself through our free course releases on YouTube. It all starts at cinematographyforactors.com. And if you like this episode, consider leaving a review to make it easier for other listeners to find us.